kéré o, wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa, àwọn ọmọdé wọ̀nyí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be that. I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi. I'm no qua, Osinachi. Man, Osinachi. I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi. Mama, Osinachi.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa, àwọn ọmọdé wọ̀nyí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be that. I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi. I'm no qua, Osinachi. Man, Osinachi. I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi. Mama, Osinachi.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa, àwọn ọmọdé wọ̀nyí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be that. I'm watching. Osinachi. I'm no qua, Osinachi. Man, Osinachi. I'm watching. Osinachi, Mama, Osinachi.
kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Àwọn ọmọdé wọ̀nyí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
A ní wọ́n kéré o, wọ́n kéré o, wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa, àwọn ọmọdé wọ̀nyí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be that. I'm watching. Hey, Osinachi, I'm no kwa, Osinachi. Money, Osinachi, I'm watching. Hey, Osinachi, mama, Osinachi.
A ní wọ́n kéré o, wọ́n kéré o, wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa, àwọn ọmọdé wọ̀nyí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be that. I'm watching. Hey, Osinachi, I'm no kwa, Osinachi. Money, Osinachi, I'm watching. Hey, Osinachi, mama, Osinachi.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be that. I'm watching. Hey, Osinachi, I'm no kwa, Osinachi. Money, Osinachi, I'm watching. Hey, Osinachi, mama, Osinachi.
wọ́n kéré o, wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa, àwọn ọmọdé wọ̀nyí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be jazz. I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi. I'm no qua, Osinachi. One name, Osinachi. I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi. Mama, Osinachi. Because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be jazz. I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi. I'm no qua, Osinachi. One name, Osinachi. I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi. Mama, Osinachi.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, ladies. I don't know if you can hear me loud and clear. I know the audio is clear. Hi, Lynn. Okay, so okay, thank you. We're expecting, I know Professor Zaid won't be here, but we're expecting Ola Oduku and Professor Oyewumi. So I welcome Professor Mojuba Olu. Welcome, ma'am. And to all the attendees, welcome. Good evening, everyone. Even though this is a mentoring program for women, but I want to say good evening, ladies and the gentlemen who are part of us tonight. I want to welcome us warmly to the third edition of the Lagos Studies Association program on gender and the academy. My name is Bamidele Wale Oshino. I'm a lecturer at University of Lagos, teaching management, business, strategy, and entrepreneurship. I'm standing in tonight for Professor Yetunde Zaid, who is meant to chair this session, but she is unavoidably absent on an official assignment, which was impromptu and important, so she won't be with us tonight. So I will be standing in for her to chair this session. But be rest assured that there are highly seasoned female academics who will be backing me up and covering all my lapses. So they're going to be here to discuss a very important topic which borders on research as a career path for women in the academia, and also for female graduates who are interested in following this pathway. Now, before I go into the main program and introduce our discussants and panelists for this evening, I want to give a brief background information about this program and what it is all about. So this is the LSA mentoring program, Legal Studies Association program for women graduate students. Initially started in Nigeria for Nigerian women graduates, but as it is now, the program has expanded beyond the borders or the boundaries of Nigeria. The program was launched in 2019, and it was curated mainly to provide opportunities for female graduate students to work with established scholars in the humanities and the social sciences. Over the years, we've had regular conversations and professional development programs for female academics, early career researchers who are women, and also female graduates. And this mentoring program has been able to equip these people with the confidence and skills that they need to develop as strong intellectuals. On this program, we have senior female scholars who have given their time, pro bono, to serve as role model for these graduate students. And they've been working with them to develop competent skills, to enable them develop a sustainable, productive career within the academia. So in addition to meeting with these mentees on one-on-one, these mentors have had 2 successful interactive sessions with Nigerian-based women graduates, and which was done on the platform of LSA in 2019. I would say proudly that this program has been very, very successful, because we've had female graduates progress successfully into the academia in the last 3 years. And we've also organized 2 well-attended webinars on sexual harassment in higher education, which took place in October 2020. That program was very successful and well attended. Tonight, it gives me great pleasure to welcome us again to another edition of this program. This is a part 2 of this program. Part 1 took place yesterday. And this is a progression, and it promises to be very interesting, engaging, interactive, because I have with me, like I mentioned earlier, highly seasoned women who are in the academia, who are well known and well placed in their various disciplines. I will just briefly mention their names, even though they will be introducing themselves briefly as we progress. I have with me right here on the platform, Professor Mojuba Olufunke Okomi. Welcome, ma'am. She's one of the discussants for tonight's program. I have with me Lynn Skyler. She's also here, right here on the program as we speak. As we progress, the other 2 speakers, discussants, will be joining us. We're expecting Professor Oyewunke Oyewumi and Professor Ola Uduku. Like I mentioned earlier, Professor Yesterday Zaid, who was meant to chair this session, is unavoidably absent. Now, I will just briefly introduce the topic that we would be speaking to tonight. It is a very interesting topic. It speaks to an area which is pivotal to our career path as women in the academia. It is not an overflogged phrase or statement, because it's backed scientifically that the university system historically was designed for men. And this is common as with most age-long institutions. So consequently, the systems and structures that we have in place within this institution favors, it has a traditional working pattern that favors one gender above the other. In theory and practice, we may say that women are, I don't want, for lack of a better word to use, are being made, I don't want to use the word first, to conform to the traditional stereotypical work patterns and designs originally meant for men. Although we have been witnessing changes and positive developments over the past few decades, the academia still remains a highly demanding field. And I keep saying to myself, because I would say that I'm the, I might be the newest, into this field amongst the panelists, that the only flexibility required from us in the academia rather, are long and odd hours. But as women graduates and female academics, we must learn to climb the ladder successfully. And research remains a pivotal aspect of our career. So tonight, we'll be focusing our discussions on how to expand the boundaries of research for women in the academia. So there's some questions I would throw out for our panelists to pick up and speak to. Since we have two people majorly right here, right now, they would be speaking for at least 10 minutes each, between 10 to 15 minutes each, speaking to the different questions that would come, which we've prepared for this session. And we'll give another 30 minutes for questions and, from the participants. So please, as they progress, kindly put your questions in the Q&A box. I will be picking the questions from there, and we would endeavor to answer the questions as detailed as possible at the end of the discussions. So first and foremost, I will be inviting Professor Ojubaolu Okomi, who would be, starting the discussion. And the first question I want to throw to our discussant tonight is if you can briefly discuss the scope of research as a career path within the academia. So over to you, Professor Okomi.
Please, could you say that again?
Can you please briefly discuss the scope of research as a career path within the academia?
My scope or a general scope?
You can approach it from, you're
no,
sitting
because
with
I
a
think
wealth of experience, and it's nice to hear, a broad scope, and then using your experience, as where, just speaking, looking at research in a generic way within the academia, just speaking to it generally.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I'd rather talk about myself, because I think it is almost impossible to meaningfully make generalizations, because, there are disciplinary differences.
Yeah.
Also differences based on disparities in access to the resources that a person needs.
Yeah.
And there are also regional disparities, So I think that research is, for me, one of the most exciting aspects of my work, because it enables me to answer questions that I have. It also enables me to enrich the quality of all the other things that I do, my writing, my teaching. And so, I guess the first way in which one is introduced to serious research is while you do it while you're a student, and you can enjoy it when it is in a nurturing environment, and where one is excited about the questions and the subject matter. Now, if you're in an environment where you are, where it's more regimented and somebody forces you into focusing on things that are not of interest to you, it can be quite alienating. And I'm saying this because as a graduate student, as a PhD student, when I went to meet my mentor, we had a cordial discussion, and it was, okay, what are your research interests? Oh, no, first, what area of the world would you like to focus on? I'm an international relations person and also focus on international political economy. And I said, Africa. This person told me that that was irrelevant and I should quickly drop that idea, because if I study Africa, I would have it would be almost impossible for me to find a job. I told him I was interested in Africa. He says, I can't advise you. So that's my foray into serious research. Of course, as an undergraduate and as a master's student, I had a more rewarding experience because the people that mentored me believed in my vision. And we worked together and I produced the study in a written form. And I thought, my PhD experience would also be similar. It wasn't. So I had to motivate myself and I had to swim against, tremendous odds to ensure that I did what I needed to do well, and that I did it in a timely manner. So your mentor not supporting you means that you might not be introduced to all the wonderful resources that are available, like research funds, like fellowships, like even guidance, and having somebody to bounce ideas off with and have some high-level academic discussion. So self-motivation, self-mentoring, and doing my research on my own shoestring was my introduction into high-level research. And I went to a very reputable institution where other people had a different experience. So, and because I was a foreign student, and then I became a mother my first year of my PhD, it made my life actually impossible. And many times I thought about not continuing. I'm glad I finished. And what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So, I became very adventurous. Since, nobody was interested in what I was doing, I was the only person interested. I actually, in the midst of all that difficulty, was able to produce work that I'm very proud of. And it prepared me for the publish or perish world of a young academic person, and also motivated me to establish scholarly outlets for people who are similarly marginalized, So as a very young scholar, I, founded 2 scholarly peer-reviewed journals. I collaborated with colleagues to form, loose consortia that did research together, that, had discussions that were rewarding and that encouraged me, because it's good to do these things in a community that values you as a scholar. So for me, research is essential, because some of the conditions within the academy are very brutal. And the brutality is especially vicious when it comes to women when it comes to people of color, because my master's and PhD were in the US, and when it comes to other marginalized minorities. So one of the things that I have tried to do is actually, even my undergraduate students, encourage them to do research, library research as well as field work, and use them as research assistants so that they learn by doing. And then I have a commitment to be the opposite of the person who refused to mentor me and made my life so hellish. Okay, so I think I've spoken for way too long.
No, thank you. We're actually enjoying you. I mean, listening to all you have to say.
Oh, so the other thing is, because I do interdisciplinary, because of my experience, I actually moved into interdisciplinary research. And so, working with people who are not political scientists exposed me to research methods that other disciplines use. For example, I worked with a colleague who is an anthropologist and learned how to do participant observation, which political scientists don't really do. And one of the funny things for me is that there is a bit more rigidity in Nigeria, where I do a lot of my research. And sometimes people ask me, so how does all this thing you're doing show that you are a political scientist? So we're still very much dedicated to staying in the silos and we pay lip service to interdisciplinary research. But I found it very rewarding. And if it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for being able to connect with and build community with people who rewarded me by treating me as if my ideas are important, and having exchanges that are both friendly and scholarly, I probably would have left the academy because I didn't have a pleasant experience. And I think that, but it did make me a better person, because I'm determined not to prevent other people, younger people, from experiencing what I did. And I do advocacy now, with colleagues and institutions that I'm in, that opens up spaces more so that interdisciplinary research is more recognized and valued. And then, the ways in which that we build communities of knowledge where people are nurtured, respected, and also given more resources to do their work well. Because if you want to go do field work and people say, okay, bye-bye, go with nothing, it's going to be a struggle.
Yeah.
And it would be a different experience from if you had even modest research funds and introductions to people who might be able to help you, to get situated in your research field.
Wow, thank you very much, Professor Kome. Quite a lot you've said, from you focusing on an area of research, identifying your interests, to also identifying the geographical location you want to focus your research to. Yeah, you've spoken on the issue of mentorship, and we'll still get into that area, in a short while. But there's some personal skills, traits, things that you need to develop. We've spoken to self-motivation, self-mentoring, and this, you would say, were key to you being able to stay in, not only in the academia, but also build a research career for yourself. We will go into, some other areas briefly, but you spoke on collaboration, identifying a community of researchers that you can grow together and you can build yourselves together. You spoke into that as well. And it's also, even though you mentioned something that was very critical to for early career researchers and also female graduates who might be considering a career in this path. You spoke about research is learning by practice, and it starts right from your undergraduate level. So if you know that you're interested in the academia, so everything starts right from your undergraduate, be interested in your dissertation, which most people do not take as seriously as they should. So that would create a path, because research is learning by practice. Having said that, I want us to talk briefly on the current state of women in academic research. And this cuts across geographical boundaries. So it's not about an African thing or an Asian thing or the Western world things, but I want us to briefly speak to that. So I will be inviting Lynn to talk to us briefly on that, even though I would also want the topics, to go, the questions to be interchangeably, to go, you can speak to one and then she can speak to one. If you have a contribution to something she said, maybe what she just spoke to, please kindly do so before you go into, the second question, speaking about the current state of women in academic research. Lynn, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Thanks, Professor Okome, for opening up with so many different things to pick up on. I guess just briefly to kind of, pick up on and really echo some of the things that Professor Okome was saying, that I feel like, we come to research and academia first as students, and like the spark is lit and we get really interested, and we really enjoy it, and we decide to become researchers because we liked being students, and we liked learning and we wanted to learn more, and eventually we start on the path because it's a joy, and it's something that we find greatly satisfying. And it's like an intellectual pursuit, But the problem is, I think often, for me, the problem is, and I think for so many of us, is that there's a huge difference between research as an intellectual pursuit and research as a career. And all the problems start when research becomes a career, because then there's all of these professional and career sort of milestones and challenges and obstacles and standards and institutions and a lot of it. From the minute you start, even as a graduate student, like it's, when it becomes a career path, all of a sudden, it's hard to have solidarity because there's all of a sudden competition. There's competition between you and your cohort, the relationship with the mentor and who's publishing where and who's getting which grant and who's publishing in which forum and who's been invited to which conference. And it's like, it's no longer about the intellectual pursuit in so many ways. It's not about, I always felt like as a graduate student, it felt like, we spent not enough time talking about the ideas and so much more time talking about the framework of where the ideas are going to come out in, or which journal or which grant or things like that. And it's super disheartening. And the problem is even as you climb up in through the hierarchy of academia, it only gets worse, and that, to be acknowledged, it's all about quantity and a lot less about quality. And it feels like people aren't even reading what you're writing. They only want to know where you wrote it, not what you wrote. And who sponsored it, as opposed to just, sort of having an exchange of ideas, and it becomes very anti-intellectual in many ways. It suddenly becomes anti-intellectual, you know, suddenly people are counting how many articles you have rather than reading your articles. And you know, and it also, and there's many times when it just feels like, you know, you have to remember, you know, can we even get back to that place of just pure joy with the research, you know? And how do you keep that spark alive? And I feel like, you know, obviously, like without my friendships, you know, not even colleagues, without the friendships that I've made over the years, without the people that I feel like I can, you know, honestly share and give, you know, and I feel like, you know, we have to, if we want people to be generous with us, we have to be generous with them. If we want people to engage with our ideas, we need to engage with their ideas. We need to be good listeners before we ask others to be good listeners. We need to be good readers before we ask others to be good readers, you know? So it means also being very aware of what kind of colleagues we are to our colleagues and friends, you know? And setting an example by being the kind of colleague we want to have. But I mean, more than anything, I feel like for me, the thing that keeps me most passionate is actually not the research, it's actually teaching. It's actually being in the classroom with students. It's actually exchanging. It's actually remembering, oh, these ideas can be exciting. These ideas can actually be really interesting. They can still make people, you know, get a spark in their eyes, and they can still, you know, create a sort of passion and drive to know more. They can change the world also, you know, like ideas can really change the world. And I think in the classroom is where we remember that more than any other place. Because we don't see people reading our articles, but we do sit around the table and discuss in the classroom. And I feel like you know, teaching is one of the best ways, or being in a classroom is one of the best ways to become passionate about our research. And you know, people often say that if you're researching something, make sure you are teaching it too. Make sure you're finding a way to teach about what you're researching. It keeps you most up to date, and it keeps you most engaged. And it, you know, you have to convince other people about why it's interesting and why it matters. And so, and the other thing is just, you know, for me personally, I'm a historian. Getting back into the field as much as possible, you know, getting out of the office, getting out of the library, you know, engaging as much as I can outside of the university has always been the thing that gets you most invigorated and inspired. And I think probably the best way to survive the world of research and academia is to embrace the concept of good enough. To know when something is good enough, to not beat yourself up for perfection, but to know when it's fine, you know, it's good enough, you know, in the way of like, just hit send, hit send or print or submit, you know, to know when it's time, to know when it's that it, you know, to have confidence in yourself that you've done, that it's good enough already, you know, and to believe in yourself that it also is good enough, and to not strive for perfection. It's my personal opinion, is that, you know, perfection is probably the worst enemy for any researcher, or an overzealous quest for perfection. So, and I think that a lot of those things often have to do with, I mean, all of that completely ties into your question about women. I feel like as women, we have a hard time believing what we do is good enough. As women, we have a hard time embracing a voice of authority, and hard time embracing, you know, I think we're much better at, for me personally, maybe I don't want to speak for all women, I shouldn't speak for all women, but I remember how many years it took before I felt like I'm not just a student, I can also be a teacher. Like making that transition between identifying between being a student to being a researcher or a lecturer or a teacher is very, very hard. It was hard for me to make that transition. Like, when can you start claiming expertise? When can you start believing in your knowledge as expertise? So I feel like those are all challenges. They're really big challenges. And I feel like academia has a lot of, I think it's much easier for men to exude the confidence and to embrace the novelty of what they're saying and the importance of what they're saying. And I think that for women, it's again, for myself, I don't want to speak for all women, but I can say that for me, I feel like I feel that maybe in my life as a woman, I was less socialized and culturally directed towards, you know, feeling comfortable in that role, you know, and it's, I mean, literally, you know, just today in a meeting at the university, it was a bunch of, again, that feeling again of that, you know, that how it's so much easier for the men to jump right in there and make their point. And so, you know, those are things that I think are big struggles. And I think, you know, to solve that problem is just, we need, you know, 52% of faculty to be women. You know, that's what we need. We need for, you know, more women in the room. I think that, you know, here I'm all for quantity, along with quality, obviously. But I think here it's just in some ways, you know, just getting more women in the room is already empowering. It's already a way of building solidarity. It's already changing it, you know, it's already changing it. I mean, so, you know, I hope that sort of answers some of the questions.
It does. Thank you so much, Lynn. I mean, you hit it from another angle. First of all, bringing our attention to the obvious, you know, we only do identify this obvious fact that there's a difference. When research is an intellectual activity, it's more interesting, you enjoy yourself, you enjoy doing it because that's what you wanted to do in the first place. But when it is relating to the pursuit of your career growth, career development, and you start paying attention to, you know, several factors which now becomes important to whether, you know, that can actually contribute to your career growth. And that's where the demand comes in. That's where the anxiety and all the other points that makes, you know, you lose, you know, confidence in yourself and all comes to play. But you mentioned something in closing, and you know, of course, you mentioned the acts of engaging with people. If you want people to listen to you, you yourself have to be a good listener. You have to be a good reader. If you want people to read your work, and okay, something very interesting, and you know, somebody saying that's so relatable as well is the fact that the classroom is the best place to disseminate your research findings, because you know, once you get feedback, immediate feedback, you know, from your students, and that you can take back to the field, and that's, for me, it's very, very also crucial. Thank you so much, Lynn. But there's something I want to ask, and I want Professor Okome to speak to that as well. And I hope she's not far away, you know, from her.
She's here.
You know, yeah, because I said something about women, I mean, especially female academics, you know, finding it difficult to believe in themselves, you know, the lack of confidence. And, you know, this has been a topic of discussion for so many years. Recently at a conference was also one of the research findings where they found out that female academics, you know, they sort of like lack basic confidence in themselves, especially when it comes to different aspects of this career. So I want to find out from your experience, what do you think is the root cause? I know Lynn mentioned maybe one of the possible solutions is filling the faculty with 50% women or 60% women. You know, there's strength in numbers. While we wait for that to happen, it would be nice to know what are the causes, you know, if 1, 2, 3, or why women find it difficult. Is it the issue of perfectionism, or I'm not good enough, or what is it? What are the root causes? Thank you.
Well, so I actually think that if one grows up being regarded as important And when the words you say are treated as significant, you know, you will grow confidence. You know, you'll be confident. And if you observe in many classrooms, I mean, people who have done research have said that teachers tend to call on boys to a greater degree than they call on girls to answer questions. I have been in, okay, so actually, as a confident and outspoken and fearless woman, you are also punished. People will call you bad names, some of which I don't want to repeat here. But I have been called aggressive because I'm not actually, I'm never quiet. I am quite outspoken. And I think also in retrospect, that's probably what put my mentor off, because I argued with him. And I argued fearlessly because I thought that, you know, we're in academic space. So if you tell me something that I disagree with, I should let you know that I disagree and try to persuade you, you know, to see my perspective. That is not always rewarded. I've been in meetings and I would say something and, you know, it would just be ignored. A man would say the same thing. And then everybody would be nodding their head and sometimes even applaud the person. If there is a situation and I push back, it is regarded as being aggressive or being bitchy. You know, if a man does that, he's being assertive. So I think the way in which the gendering of society creeps into everything we do also affects the academy. And I dare say also, the academy was not created for women. You know, it was created for the convenience of men. And in many situations, the men still act as though women are interlopers, you know, like you are transgressing into their environment. And so you have to, the things that, you know, let me also give one really, maybe not as relevant example. As a mother of a young child, if you take your child to work or you can't go to a meeting because you are taking care of your child, it is not regarded as well as when a man brings their child to work or says, I can't come to this meeting. They will say, because I'm babysitting my child. You know, for you, the mother, it's assumed to be your responsibility. For the man, oh, he's such a good man because he's taking care of kids. So, you know, the same things that we do are not regarded in like manner. So if you are in an environment where a lot of the overtures you make to be a good member of the community by giving your input and your ideas, if this is always rebuffed or ignored or trivialized, you know, it is natural for you to then become more reticent. So I think people blame women. You are damned if you do, and you are damned if you don't. I like myself. So if people say you are aggressive, I'll say, well, it's a compliment. So don't mess with me. But, you know, you do pay costs for being seen as a pushy woman. You know, the people punish you. So if there are perks, they'll deny it to you. I mean, and then it's tiresome to constantly have to struggle to assert yourself when other people don't even have to try, you know. So I think that I like Lynn's idea. And Lynn, please call me Funke. Okay. You know, I like your idea that we need more women. And then we also need to form these nurturing communities where we help one another, motivate one another, encourage one another, and give helpful hints. And then, you know, use our voices when we have attained positions of authority to advocate for people who are not, who are experiencing some of the same stressors that we have experienced. But really, I think also in terms of correcting this structurally, some rules of engagement, are necessary, and in places that are very alienating, I think women should think of organizing things like that are similar to having a caucus, so that in a more structured way, they can engage the institution as a group. Because when it is a group, it is, people can't be more as easily punished as when it is an individual. So building friendships, building affinity groups, advocacy, and forming these groups that address the institutional and structural biases with policy, suggested policy and consistent push for change. Because really, I think it is atrocious that we're in the 21st century and we're still having these challenges, It's terrible. And I also think that women might think of non-academic groups that might be supportive of their, well-being, so that you are not just in an environment where you are not valued and you are being treated poorly all the time.
Before we go on, thank you so much, Professor Komi. Thank you very much for that. What if you have a situation, even as we're speaking, to this particular aspect of this discussion? We are advocating for having more women in the faculty to build strength and also support. And that could also pave way for policies that would support, within the academia that would support the career pathway for women with the right structure and, putting in systems that would actually support the peculiarity of women, the nuances surrounding women, within the academia. But we've had situations, and this, I think I would want both of you to speak to, where female academics will complain of the kind of rebuff you had from your mentor when you started, sometimes had been attributed to women themselves, senior colleagues who are women, within the academia. What do you have to say to that?
What was the question about our mentors?
Whether they're mentors or their senior colleagues along the reporting line, where the challenges are actually from women, because you're advocating for having more women in the faculty. Yes, I agree, with you, we're having the discussion, and I totally agree with you, the strength in number, the policies that can emanate from there, because they understand the peculiarities surrounding women. But what if, because we've had situations and, junior academics reporting that most of the challenges they have are actually from senior colleagues who are women. Yeah. What would you have to say to that?
I think that we obviously can't say that it's only, as soon as a woman is in charge, it's going to be better. Oftentimes it's, it's obviously not. I feel like there's no better example than the LSA and our leader of the LSA to let us know that sometimes the most feminist organizations can be also driven and led also in some ways by men. And obviously the LSA has lots of women leaders as well, but it's like, it's obvious that, Saheed is so dedicated to the issue, and so it's not just only women that can promote these kind of issues, and obviously women can be very oppressive to each other. That's obviously true, but still, I think that nonetheless, there is something to be said about just, numbers, that there being more women in the system, that there just needs to be, like, I mean, I feel like, at our university, there's been a bit of uproar about, you can't have a panel with only men. You just can't do that anymore, like you can't organize a panel with 4 men. Like, it's just unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And then just about the institutions that Funke was talking about, that it's really important. It's not just like, sometimes you just do need just certain rules in place, because then departments know that they need more women. They have to hire women because they're going to have X amount of parity of gender parity. So yeah, I mean, obviously I think that women are not immune to abusing power. Women are not immune to exploitation. Women are not immune to abuse or being abusers. And, sometimes that's even the most confusing kind of relationship, because, younger women expect the women to be on their side. They expect an ally. They expect this person to be on their side. And so some ways, the betrayal is even more painful and more disillusioning when actually it comes from a woman, and sometimes women's, I've seen in our university as well that, like, some of the most unfeminist sort of critiques, it gets very personal and unprofessional sometimes. And so, yeah, obviously that's obviously the case, obviously. So yes, I think it's a really good question. It's really important to remember that there's plenty of very, unjust and unfair behavior at the hands of women as well. It's not only men. It's really important to remember.
Thank you very much, Lynn. And Professor Kumi, I want you to, yes, but as you're going to say something, I want you to please suggest ways to navigate around that, especially when you're confronted with a senior colleague, because I'm sure there's so many people, participants, listening, and they would really want to hear what you have to say, in that regard.
Okay, so I think, women must succeed in these institutions. One thing I notice is that many people, whether male or female, feel that the horrors that they experienced must be inflicted on people who are coming behind them. So they have suffered and they want you to suffer. Some of them think that making you suffer in this way builds character, So it's as if you are entering into this fraternity where people say you must go through an ordeal in order to become a member. Some people do that. And I'm not just saying this. They have, some people have said, when I started, we had to do X, Y, Z. How come all these new people don't have to do it, And so they insist. I think also, whether it's women who are doing the hazing ritual or it's men, it's because we have these patriarchal institutions that rewards that kind of behavior, that sees that kind of behavior as necessary to the integrity of the institution or the academic enterprise. So I think actually the reason why women are being as evil to women as they are is because of patriarchy. They want to be successful. So if you're that kind of a person, you might be respected by the boys' club, And so you would more quickly be incorporated because it might be seen as this, show of strength or show of force or whatever, it's a very masculinist kind of thing. And I think also you can't, unhealthy competition can be manifested from both males and from both women and men, And sometimes this kind of rough treatment comes from an unhealthy feeling of this person maybe getting something that I didn't get, or is having an easier time. I just don't like this person. And when I was coming up, the people who didn't like me, this is how they treated. So I'm going to do it to them. And then they learn how to do that. So it becomes a self-reinforcing system. I also think that you must pick your people. You can't go by just okay, this is a woman, and so naturally she's going to embrace me. If a person is toxic, whether they're woman or man, I think one should avoid them. And go find your people, because I think the essence of having more women is that then there's more of a pool to choose from, Instead of having just a sprinkling, where then to look for the good people becomes almost impossible, and then the good people are overstretched, If we have more, then there are more people that you can select from. And I think also, like I said, sometimes one has to go outside of the academic community to fill those needs of having supportive and nurturing and mentoring environment, because there's just no possibility. And I'm saying this advisedly. In my institution, there's so few of us, just a handful, who are interested in Africa. And we're not necessarily friendly with one another, So that means that I have to look elsewhere. And for me, actually, technology has been an asset, because it enables me to connect with people who are interested in the things that interest me. And maybe because, from very early on, because I was in diaspora, I thought of myself as being in Babylon. In order to survive, I really had to do the work of finding people, going to, I guess I was lucky in New York City. I was able to go I was at Columbia University. I attended the Africa seminar that they had at the City University of New York's Graduate Center, where there were more people who were interested and who were nice and kind. Majority of them were men, So, and then, the conferences I attended, I was lucky that I found some people. And, sometimes it's just a small community. Like I said, I don't think people should discount this. You have to encourage yourself, a lot of the time. And learn to, Lynn said something about just learn when something is good enough, Learn when something is good enough, find people. And those people, and in the early days, it was just email. We didn't even have this. I remember the first time somebody said, when he's passed away, it was Pius Adesomi. He said, let's use video. I said, I don't know how to do that. So it was Pius who taught me. And I actually found it I didn't like it, So these technologies can be an asset and I've had people approach me and say, can we have a Zoom discussion? Because they're having a hard time where they are. Some of the things I have done is help people to construct letters that ask questions of the people who are tormenting them in a very official way. And I say to the person, I have your back. I've gone to meetings, difficult meetings with people, so I think if one has gone through trauma, finding ways of assisting other people who are going through trauma can also be healing, So, but you know,
Yeah.
one of the things is that it could also lead to burnout, because if there are not enough people that are available to do this very hard emotional work, then the few people who are doing it are overstretched. And again, that contributes to the numbers thing, you know. Let's have more women.
To be honest,
women. But you know, I think
that,
also, build these communities, put energy into building community, because then we can draw on synergies. We can also do mutual assistance. And a lot of times when you think, a lot of times, you know, the thing about being in the academy is you feel isolated. But then when you connect with people and you hear their stories, you know that you are not alone.
You're not alone.
Then, you know, in the talking, people share strategies and so forth. But it's not easy. There's no like snap solution. It's work. And I think because it's intensive work, it could lead to being overstretched and people being burnt out, and that also can push people to being like antagonistic, you know, like don't get on my last nerve.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Kumi, and thank you, Professor Skylar. Thank you so much, both of you. I'll quickly throw this out while I read the comments in the Q&A session. I'll quickly throw this out that be the change you want to see, build communities, initiate, groups, work groups. She said something about starting two peer review journals, which I believe will be more sympathetic to early career researchers, as they try to disseminate the outcome of their research into academic journals. So, that's very important. Look for groups. You can work outside your primary institution where you're domiciled. You can collaborate with colleagues in other institutions. Just look for where you can find that friendly place to actually do your work. Because, like you rightly said, in the academia is publish or perish, and especially for the upcoming academics, is important for them to be able to carry out research and also disseminate the findings of their research. So while we go on, I'll quickly just read this comment. And both of you would actually have to respond. Professor Komi and Skylar, it should be the more the merrier for women in the academics, but that does not always seem to be the case with women in academia. And I think we've answered that question. We've done justice to that. My question is, how do women deal with problems from other women in the academia? And that I didn't even see this before asking that question. I think that has also been answered, because yes, this person is saying that women are more antagonistic to other women, even more than men. So thank you to all the panelists. My question is to Professor Lin on teaching what you research. I feel in some cases it might not be possible. In my case, for instance, the department where I teach has no course related to dress history, while I am a dress historian. How do I manage in this case? So that is specific to history, but it can also be applied to other disciplines as well. So I would want to give Professor Skylar 1 minute to please address this question.
Yeah, I think that, obviously we don't always have to, we don't, this isn't even just about women, I think it's a matter of seniority, that especially when you're a young academic, you often have to teach the big introductory courses, or you have to teach, you have to do a lot of the sort of, required things and more general things, that it's sometimes harder to do the specialty things. But I think that, it's always possible to include some content of your own, even in the broad general introductory classes. And I can promise you that if you have a 13 or 14 week class and you manage even in 1 or 2 weeks to somehow bring in your own expertise and specialization, I promise you that will be the class the students will remember the most in that whole course. That will be the one that they'll remember, because it's obviously the class that you brought your passion to. So maybe, it's idealistic to think you'll get the whole class to be about what you specialize in. But on the other hand, I'm positive it's always possible to bring something of your own into the greater curriculum. So it's just finding a way to do it as much as possible.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yes, it doesn't have to be you unpacking all your your findings into all the classes you have to take for that semester. You just look for, as you're preparing your classes, just look for areas where you could chip in some of the things you found out doing your research into. It could be examples, it could be just even use it as a life case. Just try to make sure you speak about your research, you teach it, and that way you even get more motivated, along that line. So I totally agree with you, Professor Skylar. Yes, I think Professor Okumi is attending to some of the questions, but there's this particular one I will need to read out, and I will want you, Lynn, to please speak to that. How can one overcome timidity when speaking among senior colleagues? How do you communicate to your senior colleagues assertively without being perceived as aggressive? How do you successfully navigate formal spaces? Okay, so that's a different one. So I want Lynn to please speak to that. I know Professor Komi has answered using our own experience. I want you to please speak to that in 1 minute, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like what I've learned over the years is that it's not so bad to be perceived as aggressive sometimes. If it's authentic, and if you mean it, and if you're really sure about what you're saying, and you feel that there's some aggression coming out of your tone because you really want to push your point and you want it to be heard, sometimes that's an affect that is appropriate. Not to be, so it's hard, because I feel, I remember when I first started, I remember one of my colleagues, a man, pulling me aside and saying, "Don't argue with that guy." I was like, what? What do you mean don't argue? Are you serious? He actually was advising me, don't argue with him. I'm like, why not? And I feel like, look, obviously we need to be respectful to everybody, and we don't need to be aggressive in ways that are brutal or vulgar or whatever. But I bet you that senior colleagues can learn, and probably many of them will be very, very respectful of you if you're perceived as somebody who stands up for her ideas and stands up and advocates for what she believes in. So, obviously, not aggressive or offensive. I don't know if the word aggressive is anyone should be aggressive, but I feel like, I think that sometimes we have to just worry less about how we're being perceived, and just trying to be, as true to what we, the things don't compromise on things you really can't compromise on. Just know what you can't compromise on, and then don't.
Yeah. Okay. I know it can be very difficult, especially when you have, we all live in different cultural, with different geographical backgrounds or places where there's some cultural norms, some things are acceptable in some societies are not acceptable in some societies, and that seems to creep into the workplace. You cannot detach the culture, the national culture from, organizational culture. So whichever way you want to look at it. So what is regarded as being rude and disrespectful in the West might not, what is let me use the West here in Africa, might not be seen as being that way in the West. So that's also nuances that we need to consider, even as we are making known our views and, what we believe in, even, as Lena suggested. Okay, so there are two things we're running short of time, but there's two questions I want to speak to. It was part of the things I put down, and some people are asking the questions, so I would rather read it and allow Professor Komi and Professor Skylar to answer the questions. Now, this is saying, how true is it that how true is this assertion that women are their own problems in what could be perceived as a male-dominated academic environment? Is it real or imagined? Professor Okomi. Please unmute yourself.
Is it true that women are their own worst enemies? Is that what?
Yes, I think that's basically what the
I don't know, I don't know. I think, oftentimes we do not scrutinize men as closely as we scrutinize women. So men can be pretty bad too. A lot of the qualities that people affirm as negative with women, you can find it in some of my male colleagues are the biggest gossips, They cannot keep confidentiality, even if you had a gun to their head and said, if you tell, I'm going to shoot, they will tell, And so we do not scrutinize men because we just see them as the norm. And we put a searchlight on women and dissect and, over-analyze the things they do.
Yeah.
Because if you really study men, you'll find some of those traits as well. Also,
exactly.
if you have power within a system, there's some things you don't need to do because the system has done it for you. Okay, so you don't need to engage in your own unpleasantness because the system is enforcing on your behalf. So you have time for other things, and you can even be magnanimous, But that being said, I think also, I think that people who experience trauma have to really work on themselves so that they don't replicate that trauma over the course of their lives. And frankly, that's what I did, that I was resolved. That I'm not going to
so much. Thank you so much, Professor Kwame. Thank you. That's for me, it's, the perception, the stereotyping of women, affects the way they are being perceived by ourselves, how we look at ourselves, and also how the men look at us. Now, quickly, I would want to also close with addressing, just giving some tips on how to balance the various roles you have within the academia. Okay, so within the academia, you're a teacher, you're a researcher, you also do some admin work, and then you have your personal life. So for the married ones, you have children, you have husbands, you have extended family members in Africa, in Asia, South America. Those are very important, so how do you balance in 1 minute each? So I'll start with you, Lynn. 1 minute. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I feel it helps for me to not look at my phone when one of my children are going to be asked, like, they need this instant gratification, this whole, sometimes I feel like during the day I need to keep my phone away because sometimes I feel like the family, they creep into, there's a blurring all the time, when we're at work, we're with our families, and when we're at home with our families, we're at work, your phone makes it like we have no division anymore between when is family, when is home, You can be in the middle of a meeting and my daughter wants to know where her pants are, and then I could be in the middle of a dinner with my family and my student wants to know what I thought of their paper, I think that we need to stay off of our phones, I think, as a lot of times, and keep them, turn them off Sometimes
I don't know how possible that
turn it off.
is. Mom, to turn your phone off. I don't know if that's
No,
possible.
I know, and you don't answer
yes,
in 5 minutes, and there's 1,000 question marks. Why? It's like, honey, I'm in a meeting. Like they don't get
Yeah.
that. So.
Mm. Yeah, Professor Okomi, thank you so
So
much.
you can't be superwoman,
Yeah.
and you have to just be comfortable with being an imperfect person. So sometimes you'll get it right. Sometimes you drop the ball. It's okay, because I don't think we should look at life in episodic ways. We should look at life as a process and a journey. And sometimes you fall down on the job, sometimes you excel. You should forgive yourself when you make mistakes, and celebrate yourself when you're doing well. But I also think that some of the work that we do that other people can do, you should outsource. You don't have to do the cleaning and the cooking and the ironing and the laundry. And then if it's a household, all the members of the household need to work, to make the family work well.
Yeah.
Of course, with
Yes,
children,
absolutely.
it is you are putting more work on yourself, because you are going to have to be after them every minute to do the thing, and it can be wearying. But like I said, academic work doesn't seem to be created for women. So we have to find coping mechanisms. And again, from friendships, you learn, shortcuts and hacks that people have for many of these things, and you can embrace them.
Yeah.
And part of that community is also collective, sharing of responsibilities,
Thank you so much. Thank you. I know we're out of time. They're already asking us to round up, as in right now. So, I mean, it feels as if we can go on and on. There's so much to talk about, and I'm sure we've been able to address a whole lot of things for so many of the attendees tonight. And I look forward to where we can carry on with this discussion, maybe in another series. Thank you for your time, and thank you for the organizers, Lagos Studies Association. We appreciate your commitment to promoting women in the academia. And I want to appreciate our discussant tonight specifically. I want to really appreciate their time and their wealth of experience and what they've shared. When you say no hold bars, on India, using their personal experience and bringing it to encourage us and teach us what to do when we find ourselves in different situations. We have to learn to lean on our strength, the strength of the friendly women within the academia. We have to put pressure on the system to bring in, to allow the progression of women easily into the senior roles where they can be, they can support upcoming, female academics. Thank you so much for your time, and for all the attendees, thank you so much for participating tonight. Thank you for your questions, and we hope to see you in the other sessions as the conference progresses, and also next year for this particular segment.
Hopefully live.
Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Live. Lagos.
Lagos. Oh yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.